Welcome to the Your City podcast, where we get to know our neighbors so that we can be good neighbors. I'm your host, Aaron Williams, and today I'm joined by Mayor Bob Carrier and Deputy Mayor Dennis Shanahan. Did I say that right? Shanahan. All right. And we are going to talk to them today about the responsibilities of the City Council, why they chose to run for these positions, and how the City Council approaches decision making. Bob, Dennis, thank y'all so much for coming onto the show.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Yes. Do y'all have a shout out ready that you wanted to highlight, Dennis?
Yes, I do. And it turns out it's a couple individuals were interviewed for a previous episode of this, but I'll stick with it because I think they've done great work. And that's Dover's Arts Commission. What they've been able to do over the last several years as a community-based, volunteer-driven organization has really led to a significant increase in awareness of arts and actual art itself. And I think one of the highlights of what they've been able to do working with planning is that every large project, every large development, housing, retail, there is a strong consideration for including art in that. And many of the developers have done that. And as you walk around, you'll see the results of that. So kudos to the Arts Commission, and more great things are coming.
All right. And Bob?
I certainly would parallel that, but the shout out that I'm going to use is the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
The Chamber of Commerce in Dover has grown immensely, and they're involved in so many things. They host so many events. They really bring the community together. They reach out to a lot of businesses, people for membership. And it's really good because there's a lot of networking. So there's a lot of businesses. They have business networking after hours in certain locations. And, they get to know each other.
All right.
So it's good. So
Awesome.
mine is the chamber, but the Arts Commission has also done a tremendous job.
All right. Great job both to the Chamber and to the Arts Commission.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's jump into the questions that I have here for you. Number one, I was curious, how do you guys go with connecting to the community? Y'all are representatives of the community. Y'all are elected by the community. How do y'all go about connecting and making sure that that representation is brought to City Hall?
That's an easy button.
Yeah.
You just stay involved.
Okay.
You go to all kinds of events. You represent the city by going to the events, and a lot of times you just represent yourself as a citizen, and it's very important. And I've been here all my life, and I can't tell you I don't miss a lot of events, the large ones, and it's all good. You get to know a lot of people. We have a fantastic boards and commissions slate. There's 29, 30 boards and commissions, and people sign up for them. There's approximately 7 to 10 people on a board. So think about how many people that represents that's out there all the time, all week long, with meetings and talking, and that's community. And then we get involved. I get involved with going to some of these committee meetings and with the chair people on that. So
Yeah.
it's all
So
good.
attendance is big.
Oh, yes.
Being involved. And it sounds also like you're saying that because y'all have so many boards and commissions and so many people from the community are involved, that's more opportunity for representation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
it
cool.
is.
And what are some ways that community members can reach out to the city and be involved
Again, right through the
through all the meetings and stuff?
they can go into the city clerk, they can look on the website, and they can see what kind of boards and commissions are out there. For instance, Rec Advisory, the McConnell Center, the Arena Commission, all of these things. And they say, gee, I think I'll be interested in trying to join them, see what it's about. And so a lot of times people go to a meeting just to sit in on it, and then they put an application in with the city clerk, and then it comes to us. Actually, Dennis and I and one other city councilor represent the appointments committee for the city. We interview these people, and they're off and running. We get it blessed by the city council, of course, a particular name that wants to join a board or commission. And so that's really how it starts. And we always promote it. We look out there, and we're down to not too many openings right now.
Gotcha. So y'all have a pretty full community. I guess all of the boards and stuff are pretty full.
And one of the things that's universally realized is that print media is not the main means that people get their information any longer.
Hmm.
And as you may have discussed with Mike Gillis, our media services director,
Yeah.
we've opened up every channel that we can through the Dover Download website, website links, uh, Twitter, Facebook. Each of those has a certain function. Now, obviously, with any social media, you do get into some balances that you have to make when it comes to information. What we get for communications a lot are emails
Mm.
and phone calls. Our email addresses are on the city website. Our phone numbers are on the city website. If someone wants to write us a letter, which I probably haven't received a letter in several years, but
know.
our home addresses are on the website too. But we do open that up, and I think everyone takes on the responsibility to respond to specifics. Sometimes we'll get uh, uh, an email to all the council saying, "Reduce the budget, please, and thank you."
Hmm.
We'll also get, "Hey, can I talk about paving on Sunset Drive
Mm.
because it's been in a terrible shape for the whole 40 years that I've been here." And then that begins the conversation, and that leads to change and things happening.
Yeah.
So you got to be flexible with that. I also keep an eye out on Facebook. You know, there are a handful of Dover specific Facebook groups.
Hmm.
Some of it you do take with a grain of salt. Some of it are people are reaching out for information, so you provide that information. Trying not to get into a back and forth, you know, if they want to have a discussion like that, and that's certainly best done face to face.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
if facts need to be provided, that's a great way to do it.
Okay. And I know Chris told me about the master community vision. Am I getting that right?
Master plan.
The master
The master
plan
plan,
Yes.
for Dover, and that is in the process coming up soon of
Yep,
being.
the vision chapter,
Yes.
because there are
10
10,
chapters.
10 yeah. So there's a cultural chapter, recreation. The one specifically that I happen to be on the committee for is the vision chapter.
Right.
We've been collecting information from residents since late last year.
Okay.
The goal is to get somewhere between 800 and 1,000 responses to different types of questions. We have coming up next week on the 18th. There's going to be several locations where people can drop in. We're going out to places like the senior center, the library, and being there to let people provide some information, what they see for what Dover should look like in the year 2035.
Mm.
What is the vision that we have? And then you do a gap analysis after that and find out what kind of things you need to do to get there. So that, again, it's the grassroots involvements that this size city can really pull off well with that kind of outreach.
Okay, cool. And how do you guys take that feedback that you're getting? Because you were just describing how you collect all that, right? How do y'all take that and then turn that into action, turn that into, hey, we're gonna do this now. We're moving forward with it. What does that look like?
Well, once you compile all the input from residents from all sorts of, different ways, and they look at that and they'll send us, the final chapter of this is what we feel that the residents want to see
Mm.
in the future for
Mhm.
the next 10 years. And it's placed in the master plan. Okay. When it's all said and done, it's part of the document of the master plan.
Mhm.
So, especially with planning, as things progress, if a hotel wants to go downtown,
Mhm.
well, geez, we have it right here. There was a lot of requests for a hotel downtown.
Okay.
So it's kind of in the vision, and it
Mm.
kind of parallels exactly what people want. So that it's a valuable input
Okay, gotcha.
for the plan.
It sounded to me like you were describing like you look for overlap
Yes,
in the vision of like, well, we had a lot of feedback for X and we had a lot of feedback for Y, and those are very similar. Maybe we can solve that problem
Exactly.
together. That's kind of how it is.
exactly.
Oh, okay, okay. And then once y'all have this vision, y'all have this feedback, you've identified areas that you can take action, and you already have I suppose people refer to it as the political will to do this stuff, right? Like you already know you have support from the community to take action on it. Okay.
Some of these larger meetings with the public, sometimes they have a facilitator, such as yourself, and they'll break it out in groups of 5 to 7 people, and they'll have the large sheet. And sometimes, if you've seen the green dots or orange dots, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts? And so each group would put a dot, say, this is important, this is important, this is important. So in the end, those groups give a report, and it's amazing how close some of those groups come to the same thoughts, the same idea.
Yeah. A lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities,
Huh.
and it works.
Yeah.
And it works.
Very cool. Okay.
So one of the other approaches that I think is really starting to work well after a council has been elected, taken the oath, and has been seated, we'll take a day out, like a Saturday, and have a goal setting session where we try and build consensus on what the goals of the council should be. And usually we come up with 10 fairly specific areas. And they do vary. Some of them are specific as start and finish the waterfront as soon as possible. I mean, that was the one that the mayor had proposed, and it was immediately accepted.
Okay.
Others is to continue to work on attainable housing, and the goals are specific enough that they can be really operationalized. That the city manager can take it, and he actually uses the goals to help him develop individual goals and strategies for his departments. So that takes it a step along. And then when you combine that with the master plan, the planning department, with the help of the planning board, can actually say, hey, this is something that we want to do. We want to go forward with this because it meets the goals, it meets the master plan, and it's something that, is attainable. So
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Works.
It reminds me of, I'm a web developer, and so I have access to different feedback tools and stuff like that. And there's one called User Voice where you create a feedback portal and anyone can post something on the feedback portal. But once it's on there, anyone who accesses it can like upvote it or comment on it. And like you can see what you can basically crowdsource, which is kind of what y'all are doing. You can crowdsource that feedback and see what people are actually rallying around, and that sounds like what y'all are doing with these this dot approach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We've done that for a lot of those committees, breakout groups, and we've gotten a lot out of it.
That's awesome.
I've been on 3 of the plans: recreation, it was sustainability of resources, and then there was one more that I was on. But anyway, we did that in all 3 groups, all 3 sessions.
And it worked
it's right in the master plan. And if you look, you can go back. And it's funny because you can kind of track what was said. It's probably going on 7 years ago on some of them. And you can look what we've done in the last 7 years, say, wow, that was in the plan. That was discussed.
It's like a little journal.
Really?
Right.
Really?
That's cool.
So
check mark by that one.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that Dover is facing at the moment that you guys are prioritizing?
There's a handful. Housing insecurity and homelessness.
Okay.
Bob has been a key player in the Tri-City effort to at least provide a temporary, somewhat permanent solution to it, working with the county. That's in motion. It's not been easy, and maybe Bob could speak to that more, but we do want to understand causes of it. We want to understand the influence of mental health and what can be done. We also recognize that, we're a city of 33,000 in a county of 100,000 in a state of 1.3 million in a country of 330 million. So our sway is limited, but we know we want to take care of our residents. We've been through the federal funds that came available as part of the pandemic response was the right money at the right time to be able to provide some support. But there's more to be done. There's more permanent things that have to happen across the county and across the state. That's certainly at the top of it.
Okay.
Uh, and as always, we're concerned about how much it costs to live in Dover. We're concerned about how much we have to ask the taxpayers to pay when we do a budget every year. We're concerned about our popularity being a downfall while we watch our home prices rise, and then the impact that has on folks who might be retired and have the family home that value keeps going up.
Hmm.
That is, these are really serious issues that we're continuing to work on.
That's such a tricky thing because if you live in Dover, home value is going up. Well, this is great. You
Yeah.
know, my investments are paying off. This is wonderful. But if you are looking for a house in Dover, you're like, well, how do I get
Right,
in?
right.
And it's so tricky because it's like if you do something to lower house values, you're affecting people's investments. I don't know. I wouldn't. I'm glad y'all are dealing with that problem. Thank y'all so much.
One project that's going on right now is off of Back River Road. It's a set of, they're not quite tiny homes, but they're 800 square feet. I think there's several dozen of them.
Okay.
I believe they're initiated by folks associated with Harmony Homes who are looking to build workforce housing, not only for their people, but for the rest of the city. That's getting some attention, and I think there may be some other projects in the works on a similar scale. And even more importantly, if we can let that be contagious, and so that Rochester, Somersworth, Portsmouth,
Exactly.
Newington catch on and say, "Hey, this could really help out the area."
Lead by example.
Lead by that's a theme that you're going to hear a lot. Is that Dover wants to be a leader in a lot of things.
Okay.
So we don't mind being the first one out there. You may get a little bit of mud on you if you step the wrong way, but we do want to lead, and we have been in a few areas.
Well, experimentation and iteration that's how you figure things out, right? So hopefully that will create a successful experiment and y'all can share the results of that.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier it was the Tri-City homelessness, and I actually have that question on here. What is the Tri-City Homelessness Task Force? And kind of, yeah,
Sure.
tell us about that.
Back along, there was a group that was formed by three mayors: the mayor of Dover, the mayor of Rochester, the mayor of Somersworth, and they built a group of 2 or 3 additional representatives, and they called it the Fidelity Group.
Okay.
And what they did is they did a study of where are we at, what's going on, how do we fix it for the homeless, for drug addiction, for mental health,
Okay.
the whole package, looking at it. And it encompassed the city managers, it encompassed the welfare department, nonprofits and everything. So there was a study made, and it was brought forth with a plan, with somewhat of a plan that they're all done. The Fidelity Group is over. The plan has been submitted. And so now, myself as a mayor, the mayor of Somersworth, Dana Hilliard, and Paul Callahan of Rochester, the mayor, take on the task of keeping this going. And now we're trying to institute, some physical happenings. And we're working diligently with the county commissioners, and we're trying to get, money from the state, more money from the state. So that's pretty much a Tri-City coalition.
Okay.
What we're talking about, it's mainly geared towards the homeless, affordable housing, change of zoning sometimes, all of the above. So we do a lot with that.
So there's a lot of collaboration between those 3 cities.
Yes, there is.
What about your other neighbors? Do y'all collaborate with them as well?
Well, one thing we do, and has started about a year ago, is they call it the Mayor's Roundtable.
Okay.
So there's 13 mayors in the state of New Hampshire. And once a month, we go on Zoom for about an hour and a half, and we compare notes. And so we pick up a lot of information, say, from Keene, from Manchester, from Nashua. I said, really? You're trying that? Geez, we haven't. So what we've done also is like Chris Parker, who was a genius with the planning. We've had him give a presentation of exactly what Dover's doing,
Hmm.
and people want to know more. As a matter of fact, coming up in June, they're going to come, the mayors, whoever can attend, and we're going to visit those that off Back River Road, those tiny home development,
Yeah, and take a look at
and
them.
take a look at it,
Yeah,
understand it. How's it funded? How do you do it?
yeah.
So, you know, so we're moving forward. We're trying. uh, well, there are some stumbling blocks, obviously, and it's mainly with the state.
I mean, no road is perfectly smooth, right? So you said there are 13 mayors in the whole state?
Yes,
Mhm.
It seems way lower than I would have
and there's
thought.
town administrators.
Town administrators. Okay.
221 towns and 13 cities.
Right,
Oh, okay, okay.
right,
Town admin. You know what? That makes more sense.
right.
Oh,
And we could go off on this for hours, but there's a different set of rules on how you run a town versus how you run
Yeah.
a city.
hmm.
Um, but over the last several years, those are getting closer and closer together. A town has a town meeting. You see the citizens holding up their yes cards.
Hmm.
Well, a lot of them now, they can have voting machines and they can cast
Yeah.
ballots, secret ballots.
Yeah.
Secret, that doesn't sound right, but anyways, they're getting a little bit closer, and towns are becoming just as complicated and hard to run as cities are. So, I mean, look at Durham. You think, wow, Durham, the university, that's a town of Durham. So they run on the town rules, but yet they have many of the same issues and complications
Oh,
that we
they
have.
do.
Well, I want to ask about, I did not know about this before we did this, so I'm really curious. What's the distinction between a town and a city, and where do these separate rules come from? Is that a state thing?
Yep, it's
Okay.
by statute.
By statute.
Yep.
Okay,
So
by a statute of the state.
a city has a limited choice of how they would run themselves. And asterisk, Manchester is different, just because of its size.
Sure.
But typically, a city has a city council. The mayor is the chair of the council.
Hmm.
The day-to-day operations are run by the city manager.
So all cities have a city manager.
Yes.
Okay.
Except there's the Manchester, Nashua. Oh, Manchester, Nashua. They have the mayor strong form of government.
Mayor Strong.
So the mayor is actually the city manager also.
Okay, okay. So in Alabama, when I was interviewing Gardendale, they just had a city council and mayor. But then Homewood, they were in the process of like exploring the city manager aspect. But here it's more of like, oh, if you're a city, you do this
with the
unless you're
exceptions of the
unless you're grandfathered in
Yeah.
or something.
So, and in towns, they have a select board, and then they have, individual entities within the town itself that run different things. The road agent's a
yeah.
really important guy in a town.
Yes.
But they have planning departments and things like that.
I know this has nothing to do with Dover. I was just very curious.
It gets a little confusing too because, some call it the selectmen, other calls it alderman, then the city councilors, and it's like when you toss it in a bowl, they're pretty much all the same
Gotcha.
to some degree, you know.
So for Dover, I always tell people, city council is the board of directors.
Okay.
The mayor is the chairman of the board of directors, and the city manager is the chief executive officer
Okay.
that is hired by the city council and works for the city council.
That's very similar to how Chris described it. So
Yep.
there's some alignment here.
Phew, we got through that.
Well, it's not just the mayor. You have a position, Dennis, of deputy mayor,
Yep.
and you're also a ward representative.
Right.
Okay. So what does a deputy mayor do
So-
that a regular representative doesn't
Yep.
do?
In my mind, it is laid out in our charter and our rules of the road. But I'm here to make his life easy. I'm here to get him
Okay.
and help him be the best mayor that he can. Part of that is when he gets double and triple booked, calls me up and says, "Hey, can you go cover a ribbon
Yeah.
cutting for me?
Okay.
Or can you go sit in on this meeting for me? Because I'm doing two other things."
Hmm.
The other thing that I think it's important for the deputy mayor to do is to help him run the city council meeting.
Okay.
to be the one with the nuts and bolts, working through the agenda, letting the chair be the chair, providing oversight, making sure that, everyone's recognized, that everyone gets to say their piece, that the processes are being fulfilled.
Okay.
I mean, there is this other thing that, being a heartbeat away, but I think he's got a strong heart, so I think we're all set there.
Well, he's a valuable asset. I mean, we sit together running the meeting, and Dennis reads the agenda,
Hmm.
and then between the two of us, sometimes we pick up on a few things that say, geez, for an example, some are just a hand vote, others are a roll call vote.
Hmm.
And when you spend money, it's always a roll call vote, or if it's an ordinance or things like that. So sometimes, did we accept that? Do we do this? Because you can't think of it all sometimes. So you lean on each other sometimes
Yeah,
and
yeah.
say, no, we got to pull that back.
Well, I'm curious, how do you, because all the other city representatives, their job is to represent their ward.
Mhm.
You have that job plus this one.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
So, well, the deputy mayor is selected by the city council.
Okay.
So we'll get together once we've seated and we'll have a discussion, who's interested in it. So there'll be, show of hands. And I was fortunate enough to take over from the prior Dennis
Yeah. Well, you
Siotti,
must
who
be pretty
was,
popular.
so, yeah, the Dennis is, but it's an added responsibility, not a replaced. I still am concerned about goings on in Ward 4, making sure that, if someone brings up an issue, is concerned about something that the city might be up to, that I, give them the voice that they need or point them in the right direction. And people do have a habit of saying, hey, I have an issue with something somewhere else in the city, but I live in Ward 4, so you're my counselor, so let's talk about this. And I
Mm.
said, absolutely, let's talk about this, and
Okay.
we'll move it forward. And if it's something that really might overlap with another counselor's ward, then I'd say, well, let's bring in that counselor and we'll have that discussion also. So you got to make sure that you keep everybody apprised. We all have tender toes; they don't want to be stepped on, but everyone is intent on representing their ward. Now, obviously, there were two at-large positions because the idea is to have an odd number, and 9 counselors is, I think, a really healthy number to have, not too small, not too big.
Hmm.
So 2 at-large, which are elected by all of the citizens. When they get their ballot, there's they'll have a couple of names for their ward, Ward 5, and then there'll be the names for at-large.
Okay.
And then they'll do that. And the mayor is elected
What is
as an at-large.
are the responsibilities of an at-large different than another, like a specific ward?
They represent the whole city.
Okay, so they're
So
senators.
if your
Yes, yeah, I think
if your
that's a good.
street really needs repaving,
Yeah.
and you're an at-large counselor,
Yeah.
and even if you don't live near that street, that area, you don't represent that ward, you do represent all wards. So you can
Okay.
take on that. And a lot of times an at-large counselor will do, as Dennis mentioned, they'll have their input, but they'll also contact the true representative of that ward if it be somebody else,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and have a conversation with that.
When you said that, because I didn't know what an at-large counselor was, and I was like, oh, I'll figure it out when I ask them. But the way you're describing it is you have the House of Representatives people who are elected based on district, and then you have the senator counselors who are like, no, 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 we're here for everybody. That's an interesting setup. I've never seen that
Yeah.
before. Very cool.
It works.
So you mentioned you think 9 is a good number. How do y'all come to that number? How do you figure out 9, this is enough representation? This is not too much. This is not too little. How do you figure that out?
Well, the easy answer is, well, it's in the book.
All right.
Our second most basic doctrine that we go by, the first being the constitutions of the United States and the state. I mean, we swear the oath to that. But the one specific to Dover is a charter. Your city charter is the rules of how you're going to do business in the city on some significant items, and that is, that you will have 6 wards, 2 at large, and a mayor for your council of 9. It contains other things on how the city council and the city manager interact, how that works out, um, even to having the description and the operations of the tax cap that is part of our charter.
Okay.
So it's a small document. It's maybe 20 or 25 pages, very precise and specific. And when people come to express concerns, one of the things they might say is, I think what you're doing violates your charter.
Ooh.
So we go back and we say, we're going to check that out. Um, one of the luxuries I think we have is that behind us at the city council meeting is the city attorney.
Right.
And he knows the charter inside and out. He knows the state statutes inside and out. And when a question comes up, we're going to turn to him and say, what do you think? Or, if
He's the referee.
he is, yeah.
Yep.
Or he may even say, I need to look into this. I'll offer you an opinion, a written
Yeah.
opinion on that. I don't think we've had to use written opinions anytime in the last several years.
Okay.
Certainly his advice is always, always what we're looking for. So
The other thing with an at-large position that's occurred in the past is, every year, every 2 years we have to run again. Okay,
Yeah.
the complete city council and the complete school board. Okay,
So the school board is also elected.
they're elected.
They're not appointed.
No,
Okay.
there's 7 on the school board.
All right.
But anyway, as far as the at-large position, there are counselors in the past and present that have done a very good job, dedicated, do their work, and all of a sudden, I say, got a problem. What's the problem? Well, we're going to buy a house in ABC development,
Hmm.
but it's not in my ward anymore.
Oh.
So the only option for that person is to run at large.
Yeah. Okay.
And they run at large, and
It's like I want to live in Dover, and I'm kind of moving over, but
you still can be on the
Right.
council, if
I'm
the community accepts it.
crossing the district lines or whatever.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's helped a lot in the past on some people that have moved, shifted,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool.
especially the younger people that have an apartment or maybe their first house, and they're moving to expand, or their job is something.
Do y'all have a lot of young people on the city boards?
Well, the number is increasing steadily. Look at the city council. I'm the youngest. No. We have 4 people under, I don't want to use a number, but 4 relatively young people at least. Bob and I, a retired teacher.
We're on the
Another
other end.
counselor is much younger than us, but not, it was really nice to see that, that they're taking the time, and it's tough. This is not supposed to be a full-time job.
Mhm.
This is a volunteer position with a little bit of help.
Yeah, I heard y'all get big paychecks.
We do. Well, but I'm going to admit, I ran for, asked to be deputy mayor, or asked for the nomination for that extra $50 a year.
Ooh, yeah,
I got 100.
Yeah.
Man,
So it's,
Wow. Huh?
I'm doing okay now. So.
take your wife out to dinner on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and Bob mentioned that we're on the appointments committee together with Councilor Williams, and just watching the talent that comes in through the
Yeah.
door,
Oh,
of all ages, but certainly there's an energy with younger folks in this
Yeah.
city. They want to come in, they want to make a difference, and they know what they want to see.
Yeah.
They're ready to learn the ways of dealing with the city, but they have some. They're set up, and they come in firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
we have an energy committee.
Yeah.
And pretty much the representatives are retired from their electrical engineering degrees from NASA.
Hmm.
I mean, this is the caliber
Wow.
that we interview. So
Yeah.
Dennis and I and Lindsay sit there, we look at us. I don't have any questions. What am I supposed to ask you?
I mean, just recently we had someone come in, and we interviewed that person to be on the planning board, the
Oh
citizen
yeah,
group,
that's right.
and then someone said, "Hey, you might want to hold off on making any appointment. We're actually thinking of hiring that person to be in the planning
Yeah.
department." And so that shows you the caliber of people coming in,
Yeah.
degreed
Yeah.
and experienced in
Incredible.
different things. So
That's
we're,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're very, very pleased with how that's been working out
Really.
recently.
Yeah. To step back to wards for a second, one of the things that I was very curious about is how wards come to be. Because, you know, somebody has to draw them out. Who's drawing them out? How is that decision made? Is it population based? Like, how do you figure out how big or how small a
It is
ward should be?
population based.
Okay. Yeah. Talk us about the process of drawing up wards and making sure that your representation in your city is well
The
distributed.
balance wants to be approximately in each ward about 5,000 people
Okay.
because we're 30,000.
Yeah.
So 6 times 5, 30. So that's a balance. You don't want a ward that has 2,500
Mm-hmm.
and the other have 7,000. So how it's a lot of the census, then it goes to the state. It gets complicated that way.
We just did a not a wholesale realignment, but we had to adjust our wards based on the 2020 census data because of its timing, because it came out much later than expected. It added a few complications, but that we worked through that pretty well. But what we saw is there were 3 wards that to follow the state requirement, which is to balance them. They do allow us to select the plus minus, the range.
Right.
I mean, you could be, hey, if you're the same, plus or minus 10%, would be okay with that. We use 1%, so we get, we're down to the nitty gritty. So there were 3 wards that needed to have folks moved out and moved into another ward, and then you have to do this geographically too. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you can't have what we really ended up doing, if you look, if you did a montage, fade from the old to the new, you would see the wards rotate counterclockwise.
Mm.
And in fact, where I live on Toland Road, prior to the realignment, my side of the road was Ward 5, the other side was Ward 5.
Okay.
But Ward 6 was right behind Toland Road. And Toland and Ward 5 needed to let Ward 6 have some people.
Mm.
So they basically, now the road splits the ward. So my neighbor across the street's not in my ward anymore. But it means I've got some new constituents down by the high school and the middle school.
Now y'all are rivals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really ever changing. I mean, not every year, but I mean, with the development that occurs in the city,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could get an area, especially when the waterfront goes in. I mean, you'll get an influx of X amount of voters,
Mm.
and that could throw a balance off.
And we knew as soon as we got the census data that it was already obsolete to some degree. The new 104 Washington apartment building,
Mm-hmm.
when the census takers came through, hadn't been occupied yet.
Mm.
Now it has been occupied, so the imbalance is already there. But that's just going to continue, like Bob said, with the
Yeah.
the
you know,
waterfront development.
that's
And
that's why they get
catch that
redrawn
again
and
in
updated and stuff
2030,
like that.
when
Yeah.
we're here, still doing it. But one thing just to make absolutely categorically proclaim is that this is not a political process. The Ward 6 councilor did not advocate to take over the other side of Toland Road,
Right.
to build up his base.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't
Well,
even know what the base is, to
At
tell you the truth.
at this small of a scale, I guess what you're describing is gerrymandering. At this small of a scale, it seems very difficult to even accomplish that.
I mean, we want everyone to know these are nonpartisan seats.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, blue, red, green, yellow, Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter. In fact, had it been partisan, I could not have run for office the first year that I did because I was working for the federal government, and the Hatch Act says thou shalt not assume a partisan position.
Ooh.
So I was very careful and talked to a couple of lawyers, and they said, "Yep, no, you're all set and you're good to go."
Mhm.
So it really is geographical convenience and coordination in how we did it. We did go back and forth. Unfortunately, at the state level, there was some gerrymandering, and people looked to us and said, "Hey, can you do something about that?" Because it affected one of our wards.
Hmm.
And we said, "No, we can't immediately, but however, we can ask the courts to see if this was the right thing to do."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Investigate.
Investigate, and they're doing that. I'm not sure if there'll be an outcome that changes anything. Certainly didn't change it for that subsequent election that occurred
Hmm.
after all that. But
Right.
but we do want people to understand that if there's a concern that they bring to us and we share it, we're gonna
Yeah.
help take some
And,
action.
and with the counselors at large, and like you said, people will bring problems to you that are not in your ward, but
Yeah.
that's how they reach out to you. You, even if it were there, it doesn't seem productive to do it, because the ability to reach out to the city and make a connection and get a problem solved is not decided necessarily by the ward you live in.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Yep.
yeah. Y'all also recently passed a budget.
Yes.
Tell me about what that looks like. How do you figure out, okay, we need this much money to go here? How do you know if something's overfunded, underfunded? What does this process
Well,
of
we live
figuring out
by a tax cap.
tax cap? Okay.
So
Yeah. What does that look like?
it's tied into the consumer-based urban percentage, 3-year average. And it's looked at, and I think it was 3.83 or something.
Yeah, we had 1 year at 1.2. Basically, it's an inflation rate. 1 year at 1.2, then it went up to 4 point
Yeah, it
something, and
went up.
then the third year was 8.1, 8.2, and you
So
ended
they
up
do
with
the
a
mean of
Okay.
that.
and it ended up
And
at 3.8 is the
so we
base.
buy, our what we were told by the taxpayers is to abide by a tax cap. But a tax cap, the allowable amount of money with that percentage that is allowed on the city side and the
Mhm.
school side is, say, the 3.8%, say. So with that, and you look at the budget, the allowable increase is already set at $5 million. So it's already somewhat of a substantial tax burden
Mhm.
to homeowners,
Okay.
business owners. Then comes, uh, well, is that enough? So
Is that enough to
to
meet the needs of
to
the
meet the
city?
needs. So it's usually the school department that has, some issues with all kinds of downshifting the state does to them, and all of the above. Everything that certainly the state takes away from. They don't give them, provide a lot more money to the education.
Mhm.
So then they're over that amount of money that they're allowed.
Mhm.
So we have the authority, the city council, to override that amount.
Mhm.
We could say, well, they need another $1 million, and we look at each other and it comes to a vote. And it's not that simple, but and
Sure.
then we override.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, and how we do it, I mean, we really dig deep. We have an 800-page budget book that's provided to us with all the departments, every dime that's spent in the city, and we look at. City manager makes his recommendation, to cut this or to add this,
Mhm.
and then we have a list. In the end, we have a list of his recommendations, and we go through the list. Above and beyond, we can look at our own list, we'll make any list, and then we make a decision on to say, well, let's go with this. I mean, we talk about it, we deliberate,
Mhm.
and then we vote on it.
Gotcha.
Generally speaking, we get to a pretty good consensus.
Mm.
Consensus not meaning it's unanimous, um, but for this year, and I'll just tell you my thought process
Okay.
going into the budget, knowing that the 3-year average was going to be, in the, close to 4%. There was, as the mayor described, there was some variations in state funding that's affecting the school department, which would cause them to go up a little bit higher. Uh, but you also have to look at the city as a whole. I mean, we've been living with 8% inflation. Luckily, it's starting to tail off and things are looking better, which is really good. But we've been living with that, and people have been having to pay a lot more for the staples, for the gas and the food. To add that much more as part of a city budget did not strike with me. And I felt going into it, we would have to find a way to get to the tax cap. And we ended up, I think we moved through about $500,000 out of the budget that got us there. It disappointed the school board, understandably.
Mm-hmm.
They're dealing with personnel changes, hopefully not any specific overall reductions.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe they are having to go to some people and say, okay, your position has been eliminated, but we have created openings in this part of the business, the education business, and hopefully they'll be able to take advantage of that.
Right.
And going into next year, we're going to have the same thoughts because, as I said, the 3 years of CPI that we're dealing with started with 1.2. Well, that 1.2 goes away, and now we're going to have 5, an 8, and a 6. And now we're talking, the average is somewhere 5.5%, 6%.
Mm-hmm.
Tax cap or no tax cap, we can't increase our tax bills by 6%. So we have got to be very careful and very judicious about that. One of the things that, again, that I use, and we all approach it in different ways, but, is that we should start basically with, in terms of staffing at zero sum, no increases. And we basically got there for the city. There was a position that was being paid for by a grant, which
Mm-hmm.
means that it's not being paid for by the taxpayers this year. However, 2 years out, that may be different. But so that's how we went through the budget with that. How I went through the budget with that frame of mind, and then we came to a consensus and ended up a couple of 100,000,
Yeah, I think it was
150,000,
120,000
120,000 under the tax cap.
under the tax cap.
Recognizing that for the owner of the average home in Dover, which today is $418,000, that's almost a $500 tax increase. Adhering to the tax cap, and that's the one of the there's two flaws with the tax cap. One is when inflation remains so low that you're allowed only a budget increase of 1%, 1.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in city or school operations stays within that. And then on the other hand, what we're seeing this year and next year is when inflation is high, and adhering strictly to the tax cap means the tax bills would be significantly higher. And that's also something that we can't go into, assuming anything. So
Yeah.
We've come a long way in the last 10 years, the councils, because we're very fiscally responsible. And by being fiscally responsible and not overspending gives us better bond ratings. And that's huge. That's important. So we have a street reconstruction that's $4 million. We put a bond out, we may get I think it's a double or a triple A rating, which brings the interest rate down, which saves us a lot of money on that. So, I mean, it's very important. I've never been a believer of the tax cap, still don't, because I don't think it parallels running the true expenses that need to be looked at to run a city, to run a business.
Yeah.
That's what we're running. We're running a $180 million business. And there's a lot to it.
Yeah, yeah. When you were describing how the budget is run, not knowing how this works, I was like, well, there's probably, hey guys, we have this much money. What do y'all want to spend it on? But that's not at all what y'all described.
Nope.
Y'all were describing we're figuring out what our expenses are and what our income is, and you're not just like calculating what the income will be. You're also setting it. Right? You're
Making
setting
the determination. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. How many car registrations are we going to do?
Right.
And that someone has to sit down and make a good assessment.
Yeah.
In terms of process, it starts with the city manager going to each of the department heads and saying, okay, prepare a budget for me. What are your needs? Identify your increases that you know of. The community services has to figure out how much salt is going to cost next year. The library's got to figure out what the current set of magazines that they subscribe to are going to cost, and they build that in. And they also ask them for, okay, what do you see as necessities that aren't currently in the budget, and they go in there.
You got your non-negotiables, you got your nice to haves.
I guess you could call it discretionary.
Okay.
But there are things that we've done that might might be considered non-discretionary, might be discretionary, but really have turned out to be absolutely needed. An example is, we got a presentation last year from the chief of the fire and rescue, and he provided us data on how many times they get uh, 3 simultaneous medical calls, and it was in the thousands. If
Okay.
and they have 2 ambulances, so that third ambulance is coming from out of town,
Yeah.
which is a longer response time. I'm sure they're all good people on that ambulance, but we're not as familiar with them as we are with our own.
Sure.
Uh, and he proposed and said, I need a third ambulance.
Hmm.
So you think, okay, let's go buy an ambulance and a EMT. That's an ambulance and 8 EMTs. You need 2 for each ambulance, and you run 4 shifts a week
Mm.
to staff it up. The bright side was that they were able to use grant money for it, and it was programmed so that the grant money will expire. I mean, we don't want our EMTs to expire. We want to keep them. So it will take 3 years for that to be incorporated into the general fund. Much less of an impact than a $1.5
Right.
million
It's a slow
immediate
impact.
bump up. It's not like we're boiling frogs, but it's a little bit less.
Mm.
But they also know that we've given the fire and rescue we've approved a budget that has this increase in it. That's going to impact what they might be able to get in those out years, because we are assuming costs for that. So you'd have to take that into account as you go through. Grants are really tricky. I mean,
They
you
are.
really have to be very careful with grants.
When I was talking to the librarians in Homewood, like one of them was like, "Yeah, I went to librarian school, which was I did not know
Mhm.
existed." And one of the topics that she talked about that they studied was grant writing.
Yep.
It's like, oh, she's like studied how to do
Oh yeah,
grant writing, and you're over here talking about how tricky it is.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
It must come in handy sometimes.
We look hard at the budget, and we try to, be frugal with it, though we know what it takes to run the city also.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example, and it was probably 8 years ago. We were looking on every rock to save some money. So the bright idea came up that, well, what we can do is we can close City Hall on Fridays. All right. So first of all, save some money, the heat and all that. Well, that didn't occur because you still heat this space we're sitting in and everything else. And the staffing. Well, the people were screaming, the public,
Okay.
because I come on Fridays and I have a day off and all of the above. It cut the hours of a lot of the employees. Some of them had to work longer shifts to make up for the Friday.
So
And
that
that wasn't working, and
you weren't saving money there.
that's all union.
Mm.
So what ended up happening, it was a real stupid move, honestly. So the following year when we had the budget, I said, no, let's go back. So we had to renegotiate with the union, with all the people to make sure. And they were very good. But from saving $16,000, that's what it was, it cost us 90 to reopen.
Wow.
That's bad planning. That's something that we look at now in context
Hmm.
and say, no, 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 no. If we do that and the grant runs out and we're going to need it and you're going to hire this guy in 2 years, it's going to bite us.
Yeah.
So
You got to have that eye on the future.
Have to.
How does this come
You
back?
have to.
And stuff like that.
And we have a somewhat similar instance in front of us now. So we're redeveloping the waterfront, taking it from it being a wastewater treatment plant to being the public works facility, a school bus depot, all that's moved out. It's 17 acres of extremely valuable land. We
Mhm.
have an agreement, purchase and sales agreement with a developer. We're going to build the roads. We're going to build a waterfront park that extends all the way around Henry Law,
Mhm.
along River Street, and heads up towards McGlarris Park. Really start to be a real cornerstone of downtown and
Yeah.
recreation.
Mm.
So we put the city's work out to bid. And surprisingly enough, they came back at a higher level, at a higher cost than initially anticipated in 2019.
Mhm.
So the question is, well, what do we do with that? Do we take our plans and say, well, let's not do brick in the park. Let's do asphalt. Let's put in fewer benches. Let's value engineer and deduct and see
Mhm.
if we can get down. They took a shot at that. I think they may have gotten it down by $300,000 or
Mhm.
something because the fundamental needs are still there.
Yeah.
Right.
And the conversation quickly turned to, well, how soon will we turn around and say, why don't we have enough benches here? And why did we put asphalt down
Yeah.
instead of brick, which is consistent with the rest of downtown?
Hmm.
And because of the way this is being financed, it really has a relatively low, I'm not going to say no impact, but a relatively low impact. And it's all really on just the folks who are going to live in that area.
Mhm.
And it, in my mind, I think we need to, you know, squeeze as much as we can, but don't cut enough corners where it loses the character of what we're trying to do there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We don't get an opportunity to increase our downtown by 10%, every year.
Yeah.
This is something we need to do and,
Right.
understand it well.
It's like, the ads for fast food burgers or whatever. The burger looks perfect. It looks so good. And then you go and you order it and it's like, what the
Yeah,
heck is this?
yeah.
That's right.
We want some good burgers
This,
here.
this isn't the same as that picture.
Uh, well, once the budget is decided on and it's put out there, how do where do you guys collect feedback on, okay, the budget worked this year. How do you know if it achieved what y'all are looking to achieve?
City managers really, and all the departments have their allotment of money within the budget that they've presented, if it's accepted, and that's
Hmm.
what they work with. And I very seldom do we ever see at the council and the tail end of things says, look, the department didn't didn't budget right and they're way over or this and that. I've never seen that.
Okay.
So we do have like projects sometimes that could be transferred. The money, if we save money on project A, if it's a similar project on project B, and we can transfer that savings to project B,
Hmm.
and so it lightens it. So it's being watched all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. And Chris told me about the transparency initiative, and I'm sure that helps when you put all the numbers out there and you get so many eyes on it, they can
Yep,
figure that
yep,
out. They can
yep.
help you figure that out. Okay.
Now, one thing that's closely associated with the budget is capital improvements plan. Now,
Hmm.
that's a 6-year look ahead that says, what do we want to do over the next 6 years? When we pass the budget, we will authorize the spending required for the first year of the CIP, the capital improvements plan. So when we passed the budget, it was approval of the fiscal year 24. Now, next year, we'll look at the capital improvement plan once again. It's a rolling plan. And then for the 25 budget, we'll say, okay, is the spending outlined in that plan still work?
Hmm.
Is it going to make it? And typically, the city manager will get ahead of us on that. And, he'll start to say, look, we've got to move some things around. Paving roads getting expensive. We can't pave as many roads or rebuild as many roads and have projects that include water and sewer. So those have been drawn out to a certain degree. It helps knock the budget back, but that moves everything out. And,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, the
Mother,
budget for this year looks good, but next year's is blown out.
right. I mean,
Right.
nature loves entropy. Things
Right.
tend to fall apart. So we try and balance it. Again, it's the word balance again.
Yeah.
that we're
And
shooting
we can do that. We can pull certain things, delay certain things.
Yeah.
We have reserve funding also for different departments. So, for instance, the police, we put X amount of dollars in a reserve fund. So when it comes time that they have to buy 3 new cruisers, a lot of times we could pay cash for them
Yeah.
because we've saved the money.
Yeah.
So we put it in the savings account every year. The school does the same thing.
Yeah.
So
Like,
it's helped.
if you visualize it as a business, a
Yeah.
business, you want your business to make a profit and you want
Yeah.
your business to have that ready for
Right.
those emergency expenses and stuff
Right.
like that. Over the years, y'all have both you've been doing this for like 10.
I've been on the council. It's pretty much 16 years.
Yes, and then you as well, about a decade, right?
Yeah, I'm coming at the end of my 8th year.
Yeah. What made y'all want to serve the community? What got y'all involved in this? Y'all been doing it for so long and for so much money, for so little money, really. Why do y'all keep doing it? What's going on there?
Well, for myself, I've been involved in a lot of stuff with the city, recreation, right down the line to all kinds of committees and baseball and a lot of stuff. And so being on the council, I look at other people that are on the council or other people that may run, and sometimes I do it, I consider myself as a protection. So I run because if that person got in or that person got in, it could really be devastating for the city because they don't believe in anything. And we look at that. And, it's not that they're bad people or anything like that. It's just their philosophies. And I'm not saying our philosophy is always right, but we move the city forward in a fiscally responsible way.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are certain people that would be on the council that you would never see this growth. There would be, a halt on it. No, we can't do that. No infill downtown, no waterfront. And that's the way it would be. And later on, it'll bite you because businesses won't be attracted to coming into the area along with people. And the taxes, you're not saving anything because the taxes are still going to go up because expenses still go up. So that's why I've run. I've taken a hard look at things to make sure if I can do a good job and be responsible. But there's also a sunset to it too.
Yeah.
It's not forever, that's for sure.
Sure.
Well, I think mine, it's a similar story to Bob, just maybe some different path. Well, some very similar paths actually. But I'd say it was kind of an odd occurrence. My son was this is 22 years ago now. My son was getting ready to play 6-year-old baseball.
Mhm.
And the guy I thought was the coach said, "Yeah, we're going to have a parents meeting over at the house." And I showed up, and a couple other parents, and
Mhm.
and he drops the equipment bag in the middle of the floor, saying, "Well, what this is really about is if I don't get someone to sign up to be a coach and take this equipment bag home, this team's going to get broken up. It's going to go play on other teams, and with the team, team
Yeah.
sizes will be too big." And I
I
said,
called y'all here
Is it?
to conscript you.
and it's one of those everybody's. I said, "All right." So I grabbed it, and
Yeah.
so about 10 years later, I'm working with him on the baseball league. We're both past presidents of Dover baseball. And I came beyond that, and I was, the Dover Parents Music Club, and all those things that I go through while I was still working. And then my working career was coming to an end.
Mhm.
I retired in 2018, so 2017, I'm thinking, okay, what's my plan?
Yeah.
And I said, and I get a phone call, and
Yeah.
says, "Hey, we're looking for someone for Ward 5. What do you think about running for city council?"
Yeah.
And it turned out to be about a year earlier, but it worked out. So that's where it started, and I keep saying
Incredible
yes
asset.
to stuff. I mean, there are so many cool things I get to do.
Yeah.
I get to go to Concord and I get to testify. On the chairman of the board for Coast, public transit organization. On the board of directors for the New Hampshire Municipal Association, who advocates for the city,
Mhm.
and then a bunch of other committees that are part of just the council business. And it's the reward is tremendous. I mean, I love my career, at the shipyard. It certainly was both intellectually and financially rewarding. I did well coming out of there, but when it comes down to actually accomplishing things, I mean, it's a parallel. It's just as important.
Yeah.
It is.
Your working career ended, but the work didn't.
That's for sure.
But I keep a fluid schedule. That's the advantage. It's
Yeah.
like when Bob says, "Hey, can you do this for me?" I said, "Pretty good chance I
Yeah.
can."
That's
I
awesome. Yeah.
always lean on
know,
Dennis.
Depending on some weeks. Next week is really good. Other weeks, I think I've been, you may put in
always
50. I might have put in 30 hours during the week.
It was.
He gives you a break.
Yeah, there's a lot of lot of things I attend, a lot of meetings, a lot of Dennis the same, and we actually complement each other because a lot of the ones he goes to, different ones I'm not at. Like I don't go to Concord, I don't New Hampshire Municipal Association, all that, but I go to certain things on with the county commissioners and all that. And when we come together, the city gets a good job out of us
Yeah.
because we have information.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can we can do it. So
The eyes
that's
and ears
that's
of the
what's
city.
important.
Yeah. Very cool. How do you guys like to spend your free time when you're not at work and you've got some moments to yourself? How do you like to spend it?
Oh, I like to spend it a lot of times at home relaxing, and then beyond that, going to sports events. I love going to sports events,
Yeah.
anything like that. I like going out to eat, restaurants, going to different communities, Portsmouth or whatever, and walking around downtown, things like that.
Yeah.
So, and travel hasn't been great in the last couple of years for us, but pandemic and everything. But I do like to travel.
Any particular favorite sports that you love to attend?
Oh, I love them all.
I know you said you love
I
baseball.
watch. I'm an avid basketball fan,
Okay.
and then I was just watching the baseball Red Sox before we came here.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt that.
Yeah,
Well,
wasn't
maybe
great.
not.
And then football. I always watch football. We watch the Patriots all the time. We don't miss a game.
Football is pretty big in
So
Alabama, so
yeah,
I'm
we watched
familiar
that
with that.
when Tampa Bay when Brady shifted. So
Yeah.
all that. So yeah, football's
Okay.
fun.
All right. Yeah. Dennis?
Well, grandkids, got three of them. Two of them are near. One of them is in Florida, which leads to the next one, which is traveling. Go out and travel. Like Bob said, last couple of years, not so much. One year, I think we must have been on the road for like 6 weeks. My son became a competitive
Oh yeah.
Olympian candidate. He qualified for the Olympic trials.
Whoa.
So we were following him around all the different events that he was up to.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was. That was a great time. It was fantastic. He was the fourth best hammer thrower in the country for a couple of years.
Wow.
Came that close to qualifying for the Olympics.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was a hobby in and of itself. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, that hiking. Love to walk through the woods. Probably not going up as much as anymore, but maybe more across. But
Flat areas.
and,
No
you know,
rock.
that-
Nice plain
Yeah.
to walk across.
so that when I retired, I told folks I had 34 years of deferred maintenance on the house. That's pretty much wrapped up. Although Mother Nature's added a few things for me to do in the last couple of years, but just working outside around the house is.
All right.
So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the most impactful, like y'all been serving the community for so many years. What are some of the most impactful moments over your service
Something that I've done that has impacted results. Is
that's
that-
impacted you?
Oh, um, I just think a series of accomplishments and decision making that has proven to be positive.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's any one thing. I think there's many things.
Okay.
really do.
Nothing specific to
Nothing
highlight.
specific
just-
because
Yeah.
you go over the years of 15 years and there's been decisions and there's been things I've lobbied for and fought for and said, no, you don't understand. We're going to do this. This is important, this and that. And then it comes to fruition. That's an accomplishment. That's, I'll give you one small example. They had a concession stand right now in Shaw's Field, which is a huge soccer field,
Mhm.
indoor. Okay. And the city council, one of the councilors was going to be a deciding vote and says, no, guys, they're not getting any money for that.
Hmm.
And I argued with that councilor till the cows came home. I says, it's important. I says, because when they make a profit, they pour it back into the fields. They
Mhm.
pour it into equipment. They pour it into this. Nope. And we went back and forth. And I said, you owe me on this one because there were things that I was on the fence with, and I believed in you. I says, you have to believe in me. And he turned around and he voted yes. And there's, bathrooms there, there's a concession, there's storage. It's a hub.
Mhm.
It's a hub, and it's been there about, what, 10 years or something, more than that, 15 years. So it was an integral part to the complex,
Mhm.
especially when they run tournaments and the concession stands, going crazy, and they're making money.
Yeah.
So, and they're providing something for people.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Dennis, do you have any
Yeah, I think
impactful moments?
there's two that kind of came to mind. They're so different; they're kind of hard to compare. But one is a few years ago, post George Floyd, the city realized that we needed to do some introspection.
Mhm.
We established the Committee for Racial Equity and Inclusion,
Mhm.
and I was asked to be the council liaison to that group for the first couple of years, and watching that group work and who came in to help and the type of people, again, younger people, certainly diverse, but also some middle-aged white people came in and they had a great perspective and they really added to it. And to watch that group started off as an ad hoc committee. It was going to get sunsetted after 2 years, but we just made it a standing committee so they can continue their work.
Mhm.
And one of the focus they've had is helping to recognize the true value of indigenous peoples,
Mhm.
and it's coincidental with the Dover 400th celebration. It seemed early on the beginning stages of the 400th there wasn't really any attention being paid to what happened before 1623.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the folks there. Uh, so that really got folded, and they did a great job.
Right.
The Racial Equity Committee and the 400th became immediately open to that, and that made an excellent facet of it. And you'll notice as you walk around public buildings, you might see a small plaque,
Mhm.
and it's a land acknowledgement, and it's just a simple, clearly worded statement that says, basically, hey, don't forget where you're standing right now,
Yeah.
part of a great city in New Hampshire, but it also was part of a great civilization and community in the 16,000 years prior, too. And it's really important for people to keep in mind. Um, and I did turn that over to Counselor Nemeth, and she has been doing just a fantastic job working with those
Yeah, she
folks.
is.
The other thing that is a group achievement. Um, Bob talked a little bit about some conversations over an issue 10 and 12 years ago that the city council um, had a hard time getting to consensus, and sometimes the process trying to get there really created more stress and friction than it did building. And we've since then, grown and moved on. We have a diverse group. We have people who are very fiscally conservative. We have people who, would like to see more spending on education, and everyone's got a different level, different perspective. But we can sit down for 2.5, 3.5 hours on a Wednesday night and talk to each other and have conversations, disagree, and then end up coming with a plan that everyone generally likes. I mean, that's really important because the public reflects on what they see at the podium and what they see at the dais.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A few years ago, the public would come and it would cause a disturbance
Oh,
in
yeah.
some of their behaviors. And they would show up just to be to, I won't say personally attack, but to make personal statements about some of the counselors. And people don't do that. They come up and say, "You're making a bad mistake with the waterfront."
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me more, and that's perfectly fine.
But the name calling is
Right,
toned
right.
down.
The name calling, the making it individualized.
Right.
That's we
Right.
haven't seen that,
We haven't.
and that's I think that's the tone that Bob and I try to set,
Right.
and it's really is contagious because I think we see that with the rest of the council right now.
All right.
We
That's
agree to
that's
disagree.
that's an
We
achievement.
have, we passed something last night, and Dennis had his point, I had my point, and it came to be, and it passed, and Dennis was not in favor of it. I mean, there's still some tweaking we're going to be doing and looking at it,
Mhm.
but there was an issue, and yeah, fine. It was like, I totally understood his point. He totally understands my point. We'll look at it hard. We'll look at it again, a certain issue.
Yeah.
But there was no problem. And years, I could tell you some years past, it was awful.
Mhm.
Screaming, some of it, you know, name calling some counselors.
Some
It was bad.
ugliness.
It was bad a few times.
One of the questions that I have here, and we're at the last two questions, which I ask to every guest of the show for this season. And my theme for this season is actually about disagreement. How do you build bridges to resolve disagreement? How do you connect with people to get past disagreement? So hearing y'all talk about that, uh, how did y'all get past all that ugliness? You mentioned you were setting an example. What are some other ways that people can get past disagreement?
You listen.
Listen.
You listen and you take what somebody says and say, I didn't consider that, and you think about that.
Hmm.
You don't stand there and argue and say you're wrong and this and that. You listen. And that, to me, I don't think there's anything else to say on that.
All right.
You listen.
Anything to add?
I think, and modeling respect, that when we sit up there, that we treat each other with respect.
Mm-hmm.
We treat the city clerk with respect. We treat the city manager. And it's one of our council rules is how we talk to each other. When we're in, when we've gavelled in, he's Mayor Carrier.
Mm-hmm.
He's the honorable mayor. He's the mayor. I'm Councilor Shanahan or Deputy Mayor Shanahan and Councilor Williams. I'm not Bob. I'm not Dennis. And we do the same thing when, say, the community services director Store, could you tell me, how much is sand going to cost us this year?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, when I'll see him at the store, picking up eggs and say, hey, Deputy Mayor Shanahan. It's like, no, here, I'm Dennis. Okay. This is Hannaford's. I'm Dennis. Okay.
He does the same thing with me.
But it's respect.
Okay.
It really is.
It is
All right.
respect.
Very good. And I think we've honestly talked a little bit about this already, but what do y'all think that the city of, you know what, I'm going to turn it around. Normally I ask, what should the city of Dover focus on next? But I'm going to ask you guys, what should the community of Dover focus on next?
Being part of the vision chapter, kind of have a little bit of an advantage there because I know what some of the citizens are thinking of about what we should be looking at. What I think is, if you would pick one single thing, is to really get the downtown to the place where we want it to get to. And I'm not saying that we're in any kind of a difficult shape. And in fact, if you were here 2 years ago, you'd say, "Oh boy, that's an empty storefront. That one's empty." There was a lot of turnover just because people were giving up their careers, and the pandemic had an impact. And if you look now, there's one building that's vacant, and I'm sure there's something brewing for that. But there's another step to come, and we've got people working on it. There's a transportation, both vehicular and pedestrian plan that we want to get put into place that makes it a really nice walkable downtown, recognizing where the waterfront's going to take us and where, that will take us going up to McGlarris. So that's what I want people to get, interested in and excited about and tell us what they want to see. We've done a little bit of that, but we really, the next year and a half, it's going to be important to make sure that a whole variety of people come up and say, hey, this is important to me.
All right. All right.
I think through networking and communication and talking to the citizens, finding out, what their wants and needs and what their likes and desires are, which this vision chapter does, and then, put it in a plan. But it doesn't stop there. It's still, it's an ongoing thing. And for us as a city council and even the school board, we need to still maintain a good reach out to the public. The police department is mandated to reach out so many hours to citizens. They are. They have to go and they have to meet with somebody and talk with somebody. How's it going? This and that. And so it's logged in. And so that's a reach out there. I love that model. I think that, fire department, they do a lot with some reach out. And I think we should do the same. We do the same to a certain degree. And even the city, the directors and all of the above. So.
All right. Is there anything that y'all would like to add before we close?
Just thank you and
thank you for doing this. I'm looking forward to see the series and listening in to what
All right.
our colleagues have said.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much for giving me your time and sitting down with me. I appreciate that. Thank y'all so much.
Quite welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Your City podcast, and I hope you enjoyed our talk today with Mayor Bob and Dennis, or I should say Deputy Mayor Shanahan. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us out by sharing it with someone else that you think might enjoy it. It could be friend, family member, coworker, someone that you think would enjoy this type of content. We don't have a big advertising budget, and we operate mostly through word of mouth, so any exposure that you can give us, we really appreciate that. We appreciate you taking the time to do it. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.